In this discussion, we will consider the importance of student and staff well-being in schools and the role of personal and professional development and safeguarding in supporting well-being. We'll also discuss practical and actionable strategies for ensuring online safeguarding based on regional and cultural background differences, including some of the biggest risk trends around student and staff well-being in schools today. I'm delighted to be joined by my guests today from different regions around the world. It'd be great to do a quick introduction of everybody. So based on where you're located on my screen, Richard, do you want to go first?
Well, yeah, I'm Richard Palmer. I'm co-director of Chameleon PDE with Angela.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richard. Aparna?
Hi, yeah, I'm Aparna. I'm currently the deputy head at UWC Adriatic in Italy, and I'm essentially responsible for pastoral care and well-being and safeguarding at the college.
Thanks, Aparna. Olivia?
Hi, my name is Olivia, and I'm working at Fochaltin's Institute for TAN, a school in Switzerland that's running a 12-week outdoor education and personal development program for Dulwich schools from Asia.
Brilliant. Thanks, Olivia. And Nick?
Nick Belcher, whole school deputy head for 2,800 pupils at the British School of Bahrain, and soon to be principal at Singapore for the PERS.
Brilliant. And last but not least, Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela, and I'm co-director of Chameleon PDE alongside Richard.
Brilliant. Great to have you guys all on the call. So my first question, looking really broadly here, sort of high level look at this. Why is student and staff well-being so important in schools? And what does well-being more broadly mean to each of you? Who'd like to get started on that one?
I can start.
Yeah.
Well, for me, when I think about well-being, I'm essentially thinking about it being directly linked to making responsible life choices, both for students and for staff, certainly for students. And, you know, it's more like, I look at it as 3 concentric circles. And when I look at well-being, for me, it's what do you do to look after yourself? What do you do to look after each other? And what do you do to look after the world? And there's sort of a constant dynamic relationship between these 3 circles, and essentially at the center of that is making good choices and making responsible life choices. So that's my sort of nutshell definition, perhaps.
I quite like that idea of concentric circles that you're talking about. It's kind of, I think as well-being has moved on through the years, it's becoming less of an understanding of what I need or what my individual people need. It's more about what they can do to raise impact on other people around them, or the effects of how they address certain things that has an impact on other people. I think particularly, you know, we're talking about why is it so important to schools? I think that's developed as well slightly in terms of obviously awareness has been increased since the pandemic, but also it's the initial reactionary measures that we were taking, but now actually it's created an awareness about the proactive things that were happening prior to the pandemic that people are now saying, oh, you were doing that? Yeah, we were doing that. Right, okay, so now how do we get involved in that to make sure that everybody is? I think, as we know on international schools, we know that staff talk to one another, and they're always really interested to know how other schools are managing their staff body as well, as well as students. Students have always spoken to each other about what's going on in other schools, and there's always that element of grass being greener at the other school because, oh, they get to do this because they have that different opinion about what their school's doing. So yeah, I think that increased awareness has been really, really great. In terms of what well-being means, and now people are progressing into understanding how they can impact on others with their well-being as well.
Yeah, I think from listening to what you both said, for Richard and I, we're in a position of advocating to schools often what we see as good well-being and supporting them with that. The great thing coming from both of you is how well embedded you appear to have it in your settings, because traditionally Richard and I have seen the whole well-being agenda in schools sometimes a little bit siloed, as if it's just something that sits on its own, as opposed to, you know, like with the concentric circles, or just being, you know, the responsibility of everybody in the staff and student body within a setting. So So great to hear that embedded view of well-being and how beneficial that can make your settings.
Yeah. Go on, Olivia.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, I think one of the challenges I found over the last sort of 5 years in moving and looking for schools that suit me as a teacher is avoiding schools that don't have it integrated in their daily practice. And so that means I'm a maths teacher, I'm not a wellbeing teacher. So really trying to work with staff and the school community around understanding that in maths, when you're problem solving, that's a wellbeing skill, that's a life skill. And so I talk a lot about taught and caught curriculum. So we have our taught curriculum, which might be in a period. I'm really lucky I have 5 periods a week with my students at the moment for wellbeing. So that's like your explicit science of wellbeing, looking at PERMA H+, the classic, respectful relationships, drugs and alcohol and all of that kind of thing. But then you've got your core curriculum, which is your student leadership, your experiential learning, the conflict in science about who's sitting next to who, and really empowering staff to be able to manage those situations and for them to understand what wellbeing is means that we can draw across it in all of our classrooms, and that it's a more powerful movement of students understanding and being empowered to take control of their own well-being, I guess. And it's really important to me. I think it's become my mantra, I think, that when students and staff feel safe, valued and respected, they're more likely to make risks, they're more likely to face failure, they're more likely to take big leaps into the unknown, and then be able to kind of recover if it doesn't go very well. So I'm quite vocal at school around it not just being a standalone thing, and really working with staff and parents to have a good understanding of the fact that it's integrated in everything.
I think that explicitness, when you're saying about it being, that explicit, people are looking for it particularly, and I think moving, it's almost there's that danger in education where well-being becomes the trite word, the same as various of words that we've seen. And so I quite like the idea of it being a core curriculum or a core understanding, that because I think very often when you have staff complaining about well-being within schools, and actually it's a case of, well, what is their understanding of what well-being is, and what do we want, what's our vision for well-being? We can make it as explicit as you want, but if somebody isn't feeling like it's a factor that's affecting them, then actually the understanding of well-being kind of dwanes a little bit. And so what we're definitely trying to capture is that embedding, that kind of keeping it was core curriculum, going, oh yeah, no, well, this links to how our emotions are feeling, this links to this particular directive within our curriculum that we're doing, or this links to what we're trying to impress on the students, and that links then to our own well-being. And I think that's a really, really good positive way of putting it, that Olivia put it, in terms of making it explicit, but then actually moving away from giving it a title and giving it that label, for want of a better word, and actually saying, what is it, and what are the traits of it, and that becomes really, really important.
And I think another thing that was really powerful for me and my understanding of it, I think I'd never really sat very well in the traditional model of education, and then I went to a positive education conference about 8 years ago in Hong Kong, and they talked about this idea that it's all about the policies and the procedures, and it's about the environment, and it's about the social norms of the school, and then the people as well. And if you've got those 4 things interacting together, and that they're based on trust and forgiveness, and they're based on embracing the environment. And like, I live on the side of a mountain, so if I'm not doing a reflection where we're looking out of the mountain and doing a bit of gratitude, then I think I'm missing an opportunity to use my environment. But that we're living and breathing well-being in our school all the time, and I think that it's a really powerful thing to show that to the students. It doesn't have to be something fancy or something, like this kind of another piece of the puzzle that we try and shove in every day, because it's there already. It's just really about making the connections for our community.
And do you, sorry, I was going to say, in all your schools, do you, given your very positive views about well-being and the importance of it, Do you feel that your staff are on board with this messaging, or is there any kind of sort of variation across the staff?
Yeah, look, so I'm in an EIM school now, and I have been for a while. I took a 3-year hiatus and went back to my home country. So, and I know that the pandemic has changed schools and whatnot. I would say across the board, there are some teachers in any schools who are on board with that message, and then there are others who are flatly refusing that they are a wellbeing teacher. And look, I tend to fall into a bit of a stereotype here. I'd say a maths teacher and a science teacher are often the ones that I have the most kind of discussions around the power of their subjects in that way. But I do know some English teachers who can't see that empathy in novels and that kind of thing is a wellbeing lesson. So I think in any, teachers are either on board or they're not. And that comes back to recruitment. I know that in a school previously, we talked a lot about the power of the wellbeing teacher in the morning, or the form teacher in the morning. And if a teacher isn't aware that they're going to have that job when they come to the school, and what that role is for the morning or the classes that they look after, then we're failing at recruitment in that way. So, they need to know what that means and what it's going to look like when they come in, because it's an important role, just as much as their subject is.
I think it comes down to comfort. There's an element of, I know when I first started out in teaching, I almost made an excuse for my empathetic approach in saying, and I described myself as being a fluffy teacher. So, at a certain point, I come with that fluffy trend. And I think certainly, my background is working in various different schools and different genres of schools, including challenging schools. And again, I was really, really grateful for those opportunities, because they built on that fluffiness. And you saw it coming by and going, okay, right. And then suddenly this whole trend of well-being suddenly hit, and I was going, oh, hang on a minute, this is what we've been doing for a while. And so suddenly you're saying to teachers, no, we want you to be open about talking about your emotions. We want you to be open about talking about student struggles. We want you to be open about discussing and preparing yourselves to have these conversations with students. And suddenly you get generations of teachers and various experiences of teachers saying, oh, we're not all that comfortable. We just do what we do. And I said, that's fine. That's okay. You don't need to change anything that you're doing right now. You just need to make sure you are a really good listener. You need to make sure that you are not running away from some of these opportunities to have further discussions with students. And yeah, it's I think it definitely comes down to teacher comfort and confidences, and giving teachers the ability to use that, and not labeling them as the fluffy teacher or allowing them to self-label either.
Yeah. or the teachers that say, oh, I'm not a wellbeing teacher at all, this isn't my area. I think the other thing that's really important with that is it comes back to school policies, so that teachers know what to do if a student discloses or shares something, and that they have confidence with how to interact with the student in the moment, but then also where to take it once that's happened, whether it be a small or a big disclosure. And I know that that's one of the things we've done a lot of work with teachers with over the years, to sort of build up again that confidence and to empower teachers to be able to handle those big moments where it kind of moves to a worrying stage.
It's really reconciling between the individual and the collective, right? I mean, there's the individual self-care and looking after yourselves and building resilience and building empathy. And then as a collective, as a school, what are systems that or cultures that are being created around well-being and around community care, really, that allow for the individual to sort of fit in and seek support, not just sort of by looking after themselves, but also seeking support within the wider community. And just going back to Angela's question, at a college like ours, it's a small high school. We're only a community of about 250 students and adults, and everyone plays a role in pastoral care, and everyone plays a role in well-being, and that is part of our recruitment strategy. And when you come to work at a UWC, you're not just a math teacher or an English teacher, but you are really an educator who's supporting students holistically across really challenging situations, also given the profile of our students. And if you have a student who's from Sudan, and currently the situation in South Sudan is such, or you have students coming in from as a refugee student, the challenges are real, and the kind of support that they need is very real. So it cannot be just upon one psychologist or one counselor at the college to support that student, because the student is engaging in multiple things at the college, and everyone needs to be available and in tune with the kind of support they need. So for me, I really see it as a reconciliation between the individual and the collective, and how they're sort of seeking support from each other, really.
I think historically, if you look at what teachers in education was before we started categorizing things, was that actually, going back historically, if you go even just to the war, students coming into a classroom that hadn't been fed, or students that were coming into the classroom, under some kind of neglect, it would be a teacher's automatic thing to make sure that they're looking after that child. This is why across the UK and various different places, if you have a child that comes into your classroom that hasn't been fed, quite often it would be very rare to not find a teacher that has a bag of cereal bars at some point stashed into their cupboard to hand those out. And that's the first step of well-being that has never been. It's just been teachers doing what teachers do. I think teachers are so used to, as well, giving the answers, or they're so trained to guiding exploration, that actually sometimes, because of their safety and their subject knowledge, when something comes up that's slightly away from their curriculum or slightly away from what they're doing, actually it takes them a little while to retake on those concepts and retake on that area of going, okay, how am I going to address this? And also it causes frustration for teachers to a certain extent on the well-being, because they're wanting to provide the answer. They're wanting to fix the situation for that particular child or particular staff member. And I think that's something that's really important as well, is that we often talk about the teacher and student relationship. Well, actually, it's the teacher and teacher relationship, heads of department, heads of year. As without looking at the SLT and leadership side of things, it's people looking after people and identifying students, and students are coming into classes and saying, actually, that teacher was a bit, look at that, they're on a bad day that day. And actually their friend or their peer or their colleague stepping in and just checking everything was okay with them really, really comes from. It's just being that vocational aspect, which again, just to touch really, really lightly, pandemic took that away, because everybody suddenly went into solitude, and their main role was to sit behind a screen, give answers, try and manage the pastoral side of things as best as what they could and implement strategies. But actually their ultimate was learning, and making sure that learning was introduced by giving those answers and making sure there were contact. So yeah, it kind of finds that blurred line between what the vocation of a teacher is, and reminding ourselves that this is what education is. It's about developing whole child, and not just academics.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the CPD that we deliver, one of the most sort of common areas that we get asked about is that whole managing and the answering of questions, particularly around some of the PSHE areas. So lots of the strategies that we tend to share with teachers and encourage them to share with each other is, you don't have to have the answer to everything. You can take time and go back and come, So it's interesting that, teachers very often do feel that right at that second, they have to have the perfect answer to everything, which is it's maybe a little struggle to move away from that, when a lot of your work and your more sort of core subject areas is about providing knowledge and answers to everything. And of course, in the world of well-being, there's not necessarily answers to everything that we're discussing, or the answers change over time, which we're finding a lot at the moment. So
that leads
to emotion.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
Oh, sorry, Nick. Yeah, I was just going to consider the next question with regards to what you touched on there, Angela, with personal development, PSHE as well. So my next question would be, what role does personal and professional development and safeguarding as well? Obviously, safeguarding is a major player in this as well, play in student and staff well-being. So considering personal, professional development and safeguarding with regards to student and staff well-being.
Yeah.
I think there's still a big gap in initial teacher education around this whole agenda. I think we're getting better at doing that. I was really heartened to hear that you've all got really good sort of induction processes in your school. Not every school actually has that, of course, but I think we are getting better, but there are gaps in terms of helping new teachers understand that their role isn't just about a subject, it's actually much broader and wider, as everything we've been saying, really. So in that, while we're waiting for initial teacher education to catch up, I think it's sort of, important for schools to have those induction processes in place and regular CPD around the wellbeing agenda, because that's a challenge in itself, because there's the very limited time for CPD. So, but I think we are seeing, certainly Andrew and I, with the schools we're working with, more emphasis being put on teacher CPD for that wellbeing element, and also obviously safeguarding is a statutory duty, but we're also seeing CPD linking between the wellbeing curriculum, but also what the responsibilities are for safeguarding. So it's a slow shift, but I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big concerns that we get a lot from teachers, and again, it seems as if you're taking the opposite approach on this one, is almost being a little bit afraid to ask questions in case there's a disclosure. Whereas each of you have quite clearly already expressed how important it is to make to make a safe environment where there is comfort for young people to make disclosures. So I mean, I think some of that safeguarding responsibility is very closely linked to whatever you're doing around student voice. So whether it's within your lessons, or if you've got other mechanisms in place to gather data, it's just sort of making sure that there's a safe environment where there's comfort around disclosure should those need to occur. But that's something that often we're finding schools in the UK, they can be a little bit afraid of asking the questions.
I think we've reached almost like a saturation point of knowledge and understanding within the school of how well-being works, and in terms of that empathetic approach, in terms of saying that the best thing that you could ever do is just be a listener. and actually, if for emotional situations, on a personal level, you want people just to check in and say, are you okay? On a personal level, you don't want them to try and give you the solutions to whatever you're going through, but you want to be listening to what they're saying so that you can just allow them a sounding board to work out a pathway. And quite often you'll end up with a conversation, not say anything, and so we go, thanks for giving me the answer, and off they go. And you go, okay, right, brilliant, I didn't say anything. But what we're now at the stage of is, because we've become so good at doing that, and it's become such a normal routine, like what Olivia was saying, it's just embedded, it's just part of what you do. There's now that other side of thing of where the safeguarding is. Students are really, really keen now to come and talk about anything and everything. And so now we're on to almost like that next level of how prepared are we for those things. So as a school, in terms of staff development, we're putting mental health first aid training. That's coming into place soon, because that's almost like our reaction now to this point of we can talk so much time around how comfortable we are within that, but actually now let's see how we can look at ways of addressing individual aspects or categories that are arising. And I'm quite happy that we've moved in that way, because it does show that you can step up a little bit more, and that we can learn more. And that's again, it's what education is about. It's about learning more. How do we deal with these processes to deal with them in a better way, to assist the students in as better way as we can, and put them first. So yeah, and actually student voice is coming up so much more, and students are coming up with their own solutions to wellbeing as well. And there's various different things that we've put in place, or that I'd like to say we haven't put in place, the students have put in place. We've just recently had a great thing on misogyny from a girl up group that suddenly went, you know what, we're hearing this general talk, and of course from fairly vocal public figures that some of the boys are picking up on, and they suddenly said, as a reaction to that, okay, let's make sure this doesn't happen to make sure that these students don't go in alongside those opinions. So then they've taken it to the students, rather than taking it to the boys and saying to them, look, don't be following this. This is really, really wrong. They've started exploring, what are these conversations that you're having amongst each other? How are those conversations that you're having with your female friends? How are these conversations that you're having with your parents? And that's been really, really enlightening. And as teachers, all we've needed to do is be there and supervise and guide, as opposed to instruct. And that's been something that's really, really clear.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, the feedback we get time and time again from students, because we run this student voice survey, and we've got about 15,000 responses. So they want to discuss more than anything. They want to discuss stuff. They don't want to be writing it down, and so it's it's coming up with their own solutions. And we've seen there's lots of focus often on knowledge base and content, even within PSHE, but moving towards like developing solutions around whatever the issues are, often which will come from their own discussion. I think you're absolutely right. That's the kind of direction of travel that we should all be taking.
Yeah, I was also just going to add that besides mental health and well-being and sort of training in that area, another big area of work that I see is crucial is sensitivity training. Just in terms of our schools are diverse communities, most of us, and we have students from different racial, ethnic backgrounds, different gender identities, and as adults, we need to do a lot of unlearning and relearning ourselves with regards to how we engage with these students, because they are well read and they know what they need and they know what they want, and for us to sort of match up to their needs is crucial. And how schools facilitate that sort of training for staff members is also really important in ensuring that all our students are equally supported, and we're not sort of using just one lens to well-being, but a more diverse lens to it. I
think I've learned so much from students. I think that's it during this time. Like, absolutely learned so much. There was the recent publication about Aglo speak and having to learn a completely new vocab that's been used, and to the point of where I've kind of geeked out on it a little bit. And by the side of my desk, hidden, I've kind of got this Aglo speak on the side because I'm looking out for various things like that. And so it's one of those things that they're influenced by, but they're also reacting to, and that's something that it's making sure that we're building the capabilities in students to say that's wrong or that's right, and that's going to affect other people's well-being, that's going to affect other people's empathy, that's going to affect other people's approach and my peers' approach. I don't want to be surrounded in my generation by people with these viewpoints that actually our generation have had to unpack so much of as we've gone through as well. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. DEIG. That's kind of come through as well from our student body, to the point of where we've got a student diversity community that said, we want to write PSHE for you. We said, really? They said, yeah, no, we want to, rather than actually you telling us what we shouldn't be doing or we should be doing through your PSHE curriculum. We want to be telling you what we're hearing and addressing that within the student body, within a safe environment of PSHE. Okay, let's have a look at that, because that could have gone really, really badly. And so they came through really, really sensitively, and they were targeting. Our older students were looking at building these foundations with our younger students and gradually feeding through these ideas and what it meant to them to listen to this language. So there's certainly education has moved so much forward in terms of where it's less, as we know, less than the teacher standing at the front lecturing, and more than the students. Sometimes it quite often feels like the teachers are sitting at the desks and the students are at the forefront, as it should be, because I think that's the only way to keep it current.
Our well-being. Sorry, Max. I was just going to add to Nick's point that at our college, the well-being program is run by our students. We call it Wellbeing and College Life program, and it's sort of a 12-session program that's co-created by students every year, along with the psychologist and a number of other teachers. And we felt like the effect that peer-to-peer, impact that this program has is way better and way stronger than what it would be if a teacher was standing and, telling you about relationships and telling you about time management and so on and so forth. So it's definitely definitely a model that we've implemented, and it's worked. So I'm really happy to hear that your students are keen on doing this as well.
Olivia, I'd be really interested. Like, how do your role is obviously part of being outside of the classroom as well and taking things out. So those conversations, you're probably going to be getting a lot of that outside of the classroom. It's how does that feed into where do you get that split between what's happening outside and outside of the classroom and then taking that into the classroom?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a really privileged position because we're with the kids for 24 hours a day. So in a day school, at the end of the day, if something's gone on, they go home. And then sometimes they come back for 2 or 3 days, because they're feeling anxious around it, or they're worried, or they're just, I call it ostrich, they're sticking their head in the sand and they want to avoid it. Whereas these kids get me for a lot of their day, or one of our other really qualified staff members. So we can kind of either do something in the evening where we can work through stuff, or I can change the wellbeing curriculum for the next week or the next day if we need to kind of look at it. So one of the things we really looked at, and I guess one of the challenges and one of the gifts that we have is we have kids coming to us for 12 weeks from 4 to 6 different schools. So they bring 4 to 6 different school cultures with them. And then we have to kind of create a sense of belonging and connection really quickly. And then in an intense environment, what we then expect is conflict and negotiation and how do I share my space with somebody when I'm an only child and all of that kind of thing. So we've done some really explicit teaching around culture creation and everybody's individual responsibility, to the point where we've got like little cues that we've used, as a reminder, where I might just say in class, if I'm teaching, I do P4C as well. So if I'm teaching a P4C lesson, I just notice something a little bit odd with, student relationships. I might just say body language, and then the whole group will kind of shift and be more inclusive in their body language. So we do get that ability to address things really instantly, and we get to know kids really well so that we can give that individual one-to-one stuff or look at it as a whole group collective. So the other thing, we've got sports academy teachers within our school who are incredibly talented and work with elite sports people and have worked with elite sports people, and we can kind of bring them in for evening program activities, so visualization or mindfulness or and they look at it as, here are some gifts that I have to offer you, and you can take it and use it now, or you can put it in your suitcase and take it and use it in a year or 3 years or 5 years.
We touched on some of these, the practical initiatives that we're each implementing in our own school settings, and so just having a look at those PSHE sessions that each of you run in your schools. Considering specific strategies around that, what initiatives have you implemented in your PSHE sessions to ensure that you're fully meeting safeguarding obligations in particular? And if we could also consider obviously safeguarding as a whole, but then also looking at online safeguarding as well, and more broadly how you've implemented that in your strategic thinking for safeguarding, that would be great.
I think that Olivia's point about having that balance between a set curriculum, obviously she teaches PSHE and there's a set program, but having that element of reactiveness is really crucial, because we all know that suddenly things pop up on a day-to-day basis, and it's having I think it goes back to that teacher confidence thing. It's about having confidence to say, we had a lesson plan today on X, but actually we don't need to do that now, we should be doing this instead. And again, I think that's building teacher confidence to be able to do that, and we're all under scrutiny all the time in schools, and and to have that confidence to say, okay, I'm doing this because and having a strong rationale for making those changes and being more reactive with the PSHE curriculum, I think is really crucial.
I think it's about bringing that PSHE curriculum away from just being standalone subjects So, it's often like, I think students often feel like we're going to PSHE and they already preempt what they're going to learn in PSHE. We're going to learn how to be safe in this particular, or we're going to learn about this particular. And PSHE teachers kind of can find themselves in this rhetoric almost of just saying, well, we were teaching about environment 3 years ago, we're now teaching about environment again. And, in terms of that, and that's to kind of relates again to, we were teaching about how to be respectful of one another. We're now teaching we should still be respectful of when you're. So it's a case of making sure that we're constantly addressing it to make it on, what is current, what is going on, but also taking it away from that subject and referencing it as you'll have picked up on this in PSHE, but in a form time, we're just going to explore this a little bit more. We're going to see how that affects us in this classroom. We're going to affect how it affects us as individuals in this particular set group, or even, it's amazing when you can start seeing it spread into other subject areas and saying, do you know what, I'm sure you're covering this at this moment in time. Well, these people in particularly history, these people were going through this at that time. How does that relate to what you've been studying in PSHE about this current time, particularly, again, DAIJ? And so this is where it becomes a really, really energetic and enthusiastic topic to talk about well-being and talk about things that are coming up, and rather than it just being that standalone category of we need to address this and this and this, which then of course hopefully would help teachers deal with the safeguarding issues that arise from that as well. I think embedding and threading is always a key.
So one of the interesting bits of data that we always hear about around online safety and online lessons that students receive in school, they always rate them very highly. So they get, great feedback. They think it's covered well. They know what they're doing. And then some of the other data sort of contradicts that a little bit. So, for example, we'll find that there's 14–15% of them uploading an indecent image. We'll find the numbers watching pornography on a regular basis is much higher than you'd probably hope for. So in terms of their understanding of what safe behaviour online is, from what they think is safe and what they think they know about being safe online, and then the evidence about what's really happening, not everybody's getting the message. So it'd be really interesting to hear how what you do in terms of your online safety lessons and sort of education more widely.
Well, we've gone 45 minutes without mentioning the P word, haven't we? I'm not talking pornography. I mean, like parents, we've managed to go 45 minutes without doing that. And so I think, parental involvement is huge. And actually as schools do a really, really good job of making sure we have a weekly newsletter that goes out that includes how to behave safely online of various different aspects that are software and various different platforms that are being used by our students to try and inform parents of this that's happening. But you're relying on parents to read it, and you're relying on parents to actually not just say, well, it's the school's issue, or it's the schools, and there's so many different schools around the world that I speak to that are saying that they get a social media issue, or they get a WhatsApp issue, a chat groups issue, and things like that. And yet the parents are saying, well, what's the school doing about it? And again, it's that flip side of saying, okay, we can provide the students with the tools to negate issues such as this. We can provide students with the tools to avoid issues like that. But parents and parents in a community aspect needs to happen. So the ways of doing that, we bring in webinars, we bring in guest speakers to speak with the parents, so that it doesn't just come from the school saying, parents, you need to be doing this to help us do our jobs in school. But also there's that element of literally talking to the parents and saying, we've heard that this is going on with among us, this friendship group. can you just build, and you're building that relationship with parents. And if we can continue to build those relationships with parents, it allows us to have similar discussions with parents, if not the same ones that we're having with the students, in saying this is happening. Again, we're in that situation of being in international education and parental expectations and fee paying and where that happens. But at the end of the day, we are all loco parentis to this particular child. And so it's about putting everybody around that child and communicating the right information and giving everybody the right tools and equipment to keep our children safe. Yeah, which isn't always easy.
I mean, the added complexity is some of the this sort of political weaponization around some of these very issues. So there's some groups of parents not wanting schools to go anywhere near some of the issues we're talking about. And yet, if we don't, then there's a safeguarding issue. So we're in a really, really sort of tricky place at the moment in terms of making sure the students are safe, but not upsetting the parents and getting your name splashed across newspaper headlines as well.
Yeah, and
I think
and
the other
while
part of sorry, go, Hannah.
yeah, I was just saying that while I think most of our efforts are sort of proactive, preventative ways to mitigate things like this, I think another big area is perhaps also building relationships with students in a way that if something does happen, or if they are a victim of online bullying and so on and so forth, they feel like they can come and talk to someone at the school about it, or an adult about it, so that we can do something about it to ensure that they're safe and whatever's happening can stop. So I think there's the aspect of trying to be preventative and proactive, but also responding in a way that doesn't make the student feel fearful or threatened to seek support should something happen. And I think those efforts also need to be coordinated.
And Parna, do you have some specific sort of insights around what you've implemented in your school with regards to that?
Yeah, well, it's tricky at our school in the sense that we're, like I said, we're a small community. We're not a closed campus where the whole village is our campus. And just to give you an example, one of the ways in which we communicate with students often is through WhatsApp, because it's the fastest way to communicate with students and figure out where they are and call them in for a meeting or whatever that it is. But then we do at the beginning of the year spend a lot of time on acceptable ways to use WhatsApp and what's okay and what's not okay. And that's part of the education in the sense that your teachers are modeling, good communication, good ethical communication online, and how they communicate with students, how they communicate with each other, with colleagues, and so on and so forth. So it's tricky. I guess we do all the things that have already been shared in terms of workshops on online safety and cyberbullying and safeguarding and so on and so forth. But in practice, it's a little more tricky. So, which is why I think more of our time and effort goes into the second bit of it, that let's build relationships in a way that if a student does find themselves in a sticky situation, then they feel that they have someone that they can reach out to and get support without the fear of being reprimanded or fear of being judged or whatever that is. So I think a lot of our sort of time and effort goes into that relationship building, rather than, sort of standing there and telling them this is the right thing to do and this is not the right thing to do. So, yeah.
I think relationship building is so key. And I think that's the biggest bedrock of what we've talked about today is where that comes out, the different relationships and the different threads that we draw between people. And yeah. I think it's something, it does just go back to what Angela was saying, like what should I say? Those topics that are culturally political, you put it well. Those political topics that we need to be mindful of. Actually, yes, absolutely. In public view and in what we put out there, but there are parents at the end of the day, and people are people at the end of the day, and having those discreet. If you've got a good relationship, you can have those discreet. Conversations with parents and to address those issues just as you would in any safeguarding scenario, and actually parents are grateful for it in experience, because actually that originally, to start off with, they'll be horrified and scared of whatever the situation is, because there's their pride and joy at the heart of this, and but actually they quite often, it will always come back and say how grateful they were that topic was discussed with them, and a way forward to discuss it with their child and involved. And again, it's about putting everybody around a child that cares, that's so important. It's saying that I had a conversation with my wife just recently, because my daughter's 7, and we were talking. I was getting rid of a phone, and I was getting rid of a phone that you're not able to get WhatsApp on. It's just a really basic phone, and I said, no, we'll keep that for my daughter. She's like, why? It's not good. No. I like the idea that she can't do anything with it. She said, no, but literally, she wouldn't be able to do anything with it. She's pointless. She can't make a phone call with it now, because everybody uses WhatsApp. Everybody uses that. Actually, you're putting her in more danger by giving her that phone. I was like, oh, that's okay then. Yeah. So we're back to tin can and string. That's where we're going. We're going to stay on that one.
Much safer.
I just wanted to say a little bit what Aparna said, is that we're an education that's student. So students are going to make mistakes and going to have great experiences and do silly things. And the students knowing that we're in a position for them to come to us, and then what the follow-up is if they have made a mistake is really important. So we tend to say that a lot throughout the year, so that it's an open, safe space for mistakes. Because I think actually that's where they've got to learn how to fix them, right?
Yeah, I
do think social media platforms need to help in this situation as well, though. I think they're an entity, because I know when Olivia talks about the silly mistakes that students make as part of growing up, and they do make silly mistakes as part of growing up, very, very difficult once that's gone on to things like Snapchat, once it's gone on through TikTok or things like that. Really, really difficult, because the companies don't help you remove them. They don't help them then get rid. And actually, there's a responsibility that we have in school that we uphold really, really high. That actually, if we had a direct hotline to say we need this removed, it takes so long that the damage is irreparable to a certain extent. So yeah, it is having everybody helping in that situation too. And yeah, children do make silly mistakes, as do adults, and we need to put ourselves in a position where the safeguarding only reaches this far because it's not being reciprocated from the platforms that are being used and the holders of those platforms. It makes our job a lot harder.
Some of the data we collect is really interesting, because students will say that the first form of support they will seek is with a friend. So I think part of our whole education around this well-being is that not only just to support the person who's having the issue, but actually educate their friends to say, if your friend comes to you with this particular problem, how do you handle that? How do you look after yourself fundamentally if it was a really sort of safeguarding issue? But then what do you actually do going forward? How do you help your friend? What sort of things can you do? Make it really practical. Because often it's like, oh yeah, teachers want to do it all, but actually the data shows that most often it's the friends that are the first point of support and contact. So we need to try and put that into education as well.
It's about knowing how to protect that friend as well. I think that's the key. I'm sure Aparna and Olivia are faced with this quite often, where it's the friend that comes forward and says, my friend's having an issue. Can you help? Well, yeah. So, and then it's the case and you find out that they've taken on that burden for so long, and it's about how do you safeguard that friend and help them negate that situation as well, because then of course friends being friends, and so social it also involves other people as well usually. So this is something that we need to be really mindful of.
Yeah, just related to that, one of the topics that sort of come up in the last few months is this concept of snitching. So when a student does come and share on behalf of someone else, they're suddenly the unpopular student at the college, and because they've now snitched and ratted out their friend. And we're also sort of actively trying to change the narrative around this, and asking for help or seeking support on behalf of someone else is not snitching. And and it is part of that larger community care and community support. So yeah, I think that's been a focus this term for us as well.
And I mean, everything you're just saying fits in really well with what Nick mentioned earlier about that whole collaborative approach with the students actually having a responsibility to deliver some of their own PSHE.
Yeah.
So, you know, the examples you're given here just, you know, they just fit into that absolutely perfectly. When we started writing materials, it was in conjunction with students. It was a sixth form students. And it was with the view that they would be able to, in particular, support some of the lessons with the younger children down the school. So, you know, I think it's a mixed bag, whether very many schools have got the confidence and maybe even the timetabling to be able to do that. But, you know, we would agree with you that is an absolutely superb model to try and implement.
I think previously it's been done with the older students as well. Obviously, looking at through school, we're not quite prepared for. I certainly don't. I don't feel. I'm not talking in terms of school-based. I'm just talking about generally, globally. I don't feel that we are prepared for how non-innocent or the lack of innocence that's around our younger students and the exposures that they're experiencing as well, because we kind of not selective amnesia, but you kind of go, they're okay if we teach the older ones to do the right thing, then they won't get that. And actually there's so much of that going on at that young age phase as well, where they're being that's it's a scary world. It's a very, very scary world in terms of that, looking in and helping them negate that. A lot of these issues aren't going to go away. That's the key. And it's through, you know, as Angela's saying, through the PSHE models that they're trying to put in place and the resources they're putting in place through all our student-led stuff. That's what we're trying to address. But yeah, that threatened innocence of our younger students is a real concern.
Yeah, and that leads me perfectly onto my last question actually for today is considering, you know, all these influences kids have online, young students, young adults, and making sure that they're seeing positive, strong role models in school, because they, you know, the rise of Andrew Tate and all this sort of stuff that they have just free access to without any filter almost through social media and YouTube or whatever. Is ever more important, isn't it, in schools to showcase that? So what strategies have you each implemented in your own school settings to showcase positive role models for students that are, you know, super young, but also, you know, maybe 16, 17 years old as well? Be great to hear a bit about that. You'd like to kick that one off? Apana, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it's difficult to sort of pinpoint sort of one practice, but I think a lot of our school systems or the culture within the school is geared towards sort of this community approach to life at the college, and it's possible because it's a small community. We live together. We share lots of spaces. We eat lunch and dinners with our students, and they see us in our pajamas sometimes, you know, when the fire alarm goes off and you have to go down and switch it off or whatever that it is. So I think students do look up to teachers in multiple ways in terms of sort of role modeling good personal, professional boundaries, how the adults are talking to each other, how the adults are negotiating differences between each other, because just like our students, we also have a very diverse staff community, and given things in the world and politics and so on, there are teachers with different opinions and different viewpoints, and students do like to sort of hear these viewpoints and like to see teachers engage in conversations that sort of model good political discourse and good political discussion, and so on and so forth. And we encourage that a lot within the college. So I think it's sort of quite inbuilt within the culture. Perhaps one initiative that I would like to talk about is we have something called college councils. And these are essentially the Political Council, the Feminist Council, the Wellbeing Council, Students of Color Association, and one more that I can't remember, the Sex Council. And on a weekly basis, each of these councils meet and hold space for conversations, and staff are very much part of these conversations. And this is also a nice opportunity to sort of bring in what goes on that week in the wellbeing course, any event that occurred in the college, any events that have occurred in the world, and then using sort of the political lens or the feminist lens or a well-being lens to unpack those things. And I think students find it really valuable, and adults, actually the staff, also find it very valuable to be able to sort of draw those connections and see how this sort of affects all areas of our life and affects teachers as much as it affects students, and how we're all sort of keeping up and coping with just the world and things that are going on in the world. So yeah, I'm probably not making a lot of sense, but yeah, it's I can't think of a particular program per se or an approach per se, but a lot of it has to do with just the community culture that exists within a community like ours, a college like ours.
I think we're pretty blessed. We've got the other extreme of it, you know, a very large school, and we have to. It'd be very, very easy, and it is. We see it happen in other large schools that they kind of lose that students get lost. I think it's the only way, you know. Whereas actually, we've worked really, really hard to make it still that's community school and that community feel, even despite our large size. So there's a plethora of things that we have where student role models for, you know, from whether it may be student-led forums that are around particular subject areas and careers, and then that develops into our younger ones. And we also have Support 360, which is where we're putting students around students and putting care around students, but also giving them a space where they can go and reach out to other students, and the older students act as ambassadors, and they can talk to the younger students about various issues, and then of course it allows then the students to flag anything that's coming up as well as either a trend or a safeguarding with various students. We've got various different whole school age group phases that talk to one another. We've got a student magazine that also bridges the connection between students and teachers, because it asks again the questions from the teachers that then get put into this student monthly magazine. And we've also got our Girl Up groups and various enrichment groups there, as well as our parliamentary groups and prefect groups and community groups. So there's all this plethora of things of community that people can be involved in, but also more importantly that we can signpost them, the students, to. And I think that's a real key element, is that actually when we get students coming to us, or where we identifying students with particular issue area, we can say, do you know what? We think there's a group there where you could go and get some positive reinforcement from this particular aspect, or look at this particular student who has some. We used to. I want to stay away from behaviour, but used to have present themselves in this particular way. Let's go and have a chat with them. And so used to be able to go and see, and so we're using again that student voice and involving them in something that they really feel that they're again motivated by, that actually this is what's happening with, they can be like that, but also it reworks in the other way, and so those students are taking responsibility and saying, I really want to help with that situation. I've seen that happen. I'm not really pleased about that happening within our community. And that's another thing, building that community and students being able to say, that's not right. I'm going to do something about it in a positive manner. And so they'll change that tact, or they'll listen up. And as well, I think part of the world that we're in, being in the Middle East, we have these very large family groups. We have these very extended sibling groups and various different things where actually they're all looking after each other in a very, very family-centric way. And that's been something that's been really, really a privilege to observe and see, because those positive role models are constantly there and constantly being expected and held accountable. But the same fact is that they're also demonstrating how to build that leadership in the younger pupils. So we're building leaders for the future as well, and that's something that's really important.
Olivia, any thoughts around building positive role models in your environment there?
Yeah, look, I think we have something called in a previous School to Speak Out and Stay Safe program, and student ambassadors who teach those wellbeing lessons, act as conduits, I guess, from the student body to teachers, and then also share and give their own examples of things that they've done, either in the wellbeing space or in leadership or in community or service leading, that they have been able to contribute to the community. And the more often we can put them in front of the school body, in whatever form, the more powerful I think the learning is from the school body. I think there's only so much they need to see of my head or another teacher's head up in front of them telling them how to do it or how to be. So if they can see how others are, they can take a lot away from that. So yeah, I'm a big advocate for using our school body and the amazing students that we have in front of us.
Fantastic. And yeah, lastly, Richard, Angela, any guidance or advice for schools that want to sort of increase their sort of positive role model strategies in schools?
Yeah, one of the things Nick said resonated and reminded me of a piece of research I was involved in, and it was about getting peer mentors together to take, and it was about behaviour change. It was quite a few years ago. It was around smoking, which isn't actually such a big problem, certainly in the UK anymore. But the way that the peer mentors were brought together was that the entire year group sort of nominated who's someone you would speak to if you if you wanted some advice on something, who's someone you looked up to. So there's a few little 2 or 3 questions, and then from all that paper questionnaires were brought together, and then it was scored. So which names kept cropping up, and then that group of young people were then trained to be the peer mentors. But it was a bit different from what we often see, because rather than the very keen sort of, want to be leaders, confident students being, coming forward to be peer mentors, it meant that we got probably the coolest of the cool group and the naughtiest of the naughty group and the most sort of swotty of the SWAT group. So we had all these kind of like leaders within all the tiny little peer groups within the year group. They then came together and were trained to be the peer mentors. So it was a very, very diverse group of young people that then were the role models around, and then, undertook various activities. And it was that was all around smoking, but you could do it with any sort of any topic area. So it was, I guess it was just a kind of a different way of pulling your role models together from what we very, very commonly see. And it brought in some of the children that probably would never have been chosen to do something like that, because they would have been a bit too problematic potentially. Mm-hmm. So yes, I thought that was a nice and a bit of a different example of using students in that way.
Always makes me smile, because when I watch these conversations in action between these peer mentors and so, it always reminds me of The Breakfast Club. You always, every different character that's in there is and actually, yeah, there's a reason why it's a great film.
Brilliant. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. That's the end of the conversation now. Yes, it's flown by. And thank you so much for sharing all your insights around wellbeing, not only for students, but for staff too, and looking at safeguarding, and especially online safeguarding as well. And it's such a vast array of topics, to touch on in 1 hour. But it'd be great to maybe do a deep dive into one of those areas more in more detail, especially around the strategy side of things, maybe in a part 2 discussion. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining, and looking forward to speaking to you all guys very, very soon.